So, cycles of dialogue, as I characterized, a two-front war. Job versus his friends. They are talking. Job wants them to be silent. Chapter 13, verse 4 and 5. But you smear with lies. You are all worthless physicians. Oh, that you would be completely silent and that it would become your wisdom. You don't have to go back to page 19 of your handouts, but that one-page overview of the cycles of dialogue reveal that Job successfully silences his friends by out-talking them. He's the Energizer Bunny. He keeps going and going. They run out of things to say, Zophar, or they become absolutely frustrated that they can't change him. That's Eliphaz and Bildad, whose third speech is just 6 verses, and he calls Job a maggot and a worm. He prevails against his friends who aren't utilizing wisdom by not saying a word. On the other hand, frustration. Second front is Job versus God. And God's not talking. The friends are talking. He wishes they were silent. God's not talking, and he wants God to speak. God has not spoken to any human being in this story, not yet. That will not happen until chapter 38. God has spoken, but he's only spoken in his heavenly abode with the supernatural beings. Job chapter 1, verse 6 through 12, and Job chapter 2, 1 through 6. Okay? God hadn't spoken since chapter 2. There is a chapter in this book that I have written, When God is Silent. Not if, but when. And we've all experienced the quietness of God. And we've longed for him in our prayers. We've maybe even begged God, please speak. I need to know. I need direction. Please, God, speak to me somehow, some way. Of course, God does communicate in a variety of ways, but he doesn't necessarily stimulate our physical senses. If we're relying on our eyes and our ears, our hands, we may not sense the work of God all around us. We should, as the Apostle Paul stated in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7, to walk by faith and not by sight. But we're human beings. We're physical creatures, and we are trained to resort to our physical senses. If we'll only rely on faith, faith experiences the unseen, the evidence of things hoped for, the substance of things not seen. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Oh, if we could walk by faith, though we're physical creatures, if we could walk by faith, we would see God's hand and his fingerprints everywhere. I want God to speak in ways that I physically can perceive. I would welcome an email. I would welcome a text message. I would. Man, I want God to speak at times that I think are crucial, according to my schedule, to conform to my expectations. But he's God, isn't he? And being God, that means you cannot coerce him. You cannot manipulate him. Nobody has been successful. I certainly haven't, which is good news for all of you. I have never successfully coerced or manipulated God, but I've tried. Why? because I'm a fool. Why? I'm going to use the S word on the internet. I'm stupid. Yeah, I just said that word. That's really a bad word. But how else can I explain? Why do I do that? Why do I attempt to manipulate God when I know He's God and I can't make Him do whatever when I want that whatever? Okay? So, good news for you all that Ivan Parke cannot manipulate God. That is good news for you, because if I could, I have the advantage. I'm so happy at the same time. Good news for me, you can't manipulate God. Nobody can. He does what's right. He does what's best at all times. At the same time, if we will trust Him, walk by faith, then we will know in a spiritual sense He's working on our behalf. Y'all, God does His best work quietly. He does His best work subtly, behind the scenes. He has nothing to prove. He doesn't need to impress. He has the power. He could be dramatic, bombastic. He could. Most of the time, He chooses to be subtle. The question is, can you trust that God has heard your prayer, He knows your situation, and He will be on time, even though you cannot physically perceive what He's doing? Marianne is not here, so I can kind of speak about her. I remember the days. The task of waking the children for school. Oh, that still frightens me, because our kids would go to bed late. They're night owls, which meant they woke up grumpy, just like their parents. Just like their parents, that's right. We lived a half a mile from Clinton High School, and it was a miracle every day. We moved to Arrow Drive so that they could get to school on time, and some days I thought tardy, that meant detention. I just thought so. And my wife, for whatever reason, reminded me, they are our children, not mine, so it's your turn to go wake up the kids. And especially Anne-Marie, how scary Anne-Marie was. Oh my goodness, Anne-Marie was scary, right? And yes. And so here's what I would do. Okay, I'm going to do the demonstration. This is going to be off. This is going to be off camera, but I can't help it, Tom. Okay? So I mean, this is what I. It's like, oh boy. Anne-Marie, it's time to get up. And Marianne would say, did you wake her? And I said, yes, I did. Did she respond? I think she did. Right. And it would be several times. It's your turn now, Marianne. I did it the last time. It's your turn. Y'all, when our daughter was silent, that meant she was still, S-T-I-L-L, still, motionless, still in the bed, not moving, right? Not the case with God. When He's silent, He's working. The God of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. He's working. He's working. He's working. No, He doesn't give you updates. Most of the time He doesn't. But He's working. Can you trust Him? Anybody, remember Elijah? He saw the fire fall from the sky, 1 Kings chapter 18. Anybody can recognize that's God when the fire falls, right? And he thinks that that's how God does His best work. And in chapter 19 of 1 Kings, he's at Mount Sinai, and God says, what are you doing here? God says, stand at the entrance to the cave, and there's a great wind, but God's not in the wind. There's an earthquake, but God's not in the earthquake. There's a fire, God is not in the fire. And then it's so hard to translate in Hebrew, but it's easy to interpret in English. A still, small voice, a sound of a gentle whisper, a gentle blowing. See, we would prefer the fire to fall, the earth to shake, and the wind to blow. But y'all, it takes zero spiritual discernment. And He's teaching us. Can you filter out all the world's noise? And can you use your faith to see I'm everywhere and I'm working on your behalf too? He's working on our behalf. So Job is frustrated. God is silent. I want him to answer me because he owes me an explanation. I want an apology because he's wronged me. Wow. So how do you make God talk? You sue him. And on this packet of handouts, page 21, I have diagrammed the lawsuit. Yeah, there actually is a lawsuit. You heard yesterday, Morgan and Morgan for the people. Size matters. Richard Schwartz, one call, that's all. Don Evans, if you can't come to me, I'm coming to you. Man, I've heard all these commercials. Lord God, I can't get them out of my head. And the mute's not quick enough. Okay? So here's Job, chapter 13, verse 18. Behold now, I have prepared my case. What is that case? That's his lawsuit. I've prepared my case. I know that I will be vindicated. That's legal language. I've got a beef with God. I'm suing him. Here, he's absolutely confident. But what you'll see, that his emotional state will be up and down, up and down. Let me show you one of the down moments that he had as he anticipated this day in court. Chapter 9, why not? Let's go there. Chapter 9, verse 2 and 3. Chapter 9, verse 2 and 3. In truth, I know that this is so. But how can a man be in the right before God? Verse 3, chapter 9. If one wished to dispute, that's legal language, to dispute with him, he could not answer him once in 1,000 times. You're right, Job. You're right. If God questioned you, you couldn't answer his questions. In the same way I tell my students, it doesn't comfort them. I could make a test so hard you couldn't pass. That doesn't comfort them. Because I'm telling them, this is actually manageable. This is actually fair. This is actually easy. No, it's not. Right? But, yeah, if God were to cross-examine, you would not fare well, Job. And in fact, you know what happens? This is kind of irony. You know what irony is? It's beautiful. Irony is that he actually anticipates, without realizing it, what God will actually do in chapters 38, 39, 40, and 41, when God asks him lots of questions. 84 to be exact. Okay? So there's ups and downs here. Now what's Job's beef? It's 2 points. I don't know if the handout indicates it, but the 2 points, but the book does. The book does that you've got. Job's got 2 charges against God. They are, and you'll see this in his speeches that begin in chapter 6. There are 8 speeches beginning in chapter 6 through chapter 27. And in these 8 speeches, he makes the following observations as he's griping, making his case against God. The first point is that God abuses his omniscience and omnipotence. Do you see? He's not denying that God is all-knowing and all-powerful. He believes absolutely that God is all-powerful and all-knowing. But God abuses his position of authority. God abuses his omnipotence and his omniscience. And I'm ground zero. Look at me. I'm suffering. I've got sores all over me. I've lost my children. I don't have any material possessions anymore. Who's done this? God, in his power against me. He abuses his omnipotence and his omniscience. He knows everything. He's got the advantage. Does he help me? No, he doesn't. That's the first point. And Job will repeat that point again and again, how God abuses his position of authority as God. His second point, we've made this point already, but I'll now put it in this context, is that the wicked prosper. They get away with it. Like in chapter 21, don't turn there, but in Job chapter 21, the wicked live comfortably. Oh, and they die peacefully. fat, which back then meant that you weren't struggling. Man, you were living it up. That's not fair. Who's behind the fact that the wicked are getting away with it, and I, Job, am getting it, even though I'm innocent? It's God. Look at the diagram. He doesn't believe he will get a fair shake. You know why? Who's the judge in this potential lawsuit? The defendant, right? And the judge is not recusing himself, is he? Can you get a fair trial if your beef is against the judge? So, think about this. Again, you are not responsible to accept my interpretation or an alternative interpretation to Satan in chapters 1 and 2. I contend that the adversary is actually speaking on God's behalf against Job because he stands against Job. The friends volunteer as if God needs character witnesses. God does not. But the friends speak on behalf of God. God later says, no, thank you. You spoke wrong about me. Chapter 42, verses 7, 8, and 9. Job, knowing that God is the judge in this potential lawsuit, hopes to have an intermediary, a third party, an arbitrator, somebody. He needs a lawyer. He needs what we would call, are you ready? Not an adversary. That's the prosecuting attorney. He needs an advocate. That's a defendant's attorney. Okay? Now what does he call this individual? I'm in chapter 9, verse 33. This is a beautiful statement, by the way. There's no umpire between us who may lay his hand upon us both. Isn't that a beautiful picture? Job is basically saying, oh, I need somebody who could put a hand on my shoulder and a hand on God's shoulder. I need that person. In chapter 16, verse 18 and 19, don't turn there, but he anticipates his advocate, his witness is on high, ready. He hopes that. And how about that famous passage, chapter 19, verses 25, 26, and 27, my kinsman redeemer. He has different names for it. We know the name, Jesus. We know the name, the one that puts a hand on our shoulder and puts a hand on God's shoulder, right? He doesn't know that name because Jesus hadn't come yet. But thanks be to God, we do have a go-between. We do have an arbitrator, the one who makes intercession for us always. But this is Job. So he's making his case, right? And God doesn't speak. And we get to chapter 28. Chapter 28. I need some audience participation. Look at your Bible if you brought one. You understand that the chapter numbers, what's below the chapter heading, is not a scripture. It's not from the Bible, but it's what the editor, the publisher of the Bible has inserted to help us. So it summarizes the chapter. Okay? I need some samples. What is if you've got a chapter title, what is the chapter title?
Interlude, where wisdom is.
That's great. And that's where that's my belief. Thank you so much, Laura. Interlude. I'm going to explain that. So what is your Bible?
I think it's NIV.
The NIV. Interlude. Okay.
Where is wisdom?
Okay. Good. I like that.
Concerning wisdom?
I like that too, Harriet. Thank you. Does anyone have what my Bible does? Oh, I like that too, Molesta. Here's what my Bible says. Job tells of earth's treasures. Does anybody have Job in the chapter? Okay, so Wendy, do you have a New American Standard?
This one's NLT. But it says Job speaks of wisdom and understanding.
And I say, no! No! Okay. All right, there's a little drama there, okay? I know. Wow. What soup did that guy eat, you know, at 5:15? I had Donna Rush's soup, so there you go. That's why I'm acting like I am. I had Susan Wilson's chili, too, so that's why I'm acting like I'm acting, okay? So there you go. No! Job's name appears nowhere in chapter 28. So if there is a Bible publisher that credits Job with chapter 28, by the way, my book does not credit Job with chapter 28. Tim Peabody's Bible study guide, Tim went along with me. It was easy because he's my former student. Tim, I don't believe that. Okay, Dr. Parke, I'll change it. Okay. Right. Job's name does not appear in chapter 28. Why? Why would any publisher credit Job with chapter 28? Answer, he's the last person to have spoken. Chapter 27 and chapter 26. Okay, so this has to be Job, right? No, I say this is an interlude. This is the narrator. Okay, so I'll explain that in a moment. Why is this not Job talking? Number one, if you're taking notes, you don't have to take notes. Number one, the tone is completely different. In chapters 26 and 27, Job is upset. He's sarcastic. Now, wonderful wisdom. The tone does not fit the posture of the man. And after chapter 28, the Job that is familiar to us during the cycles of dialogue, once again, is upset, complaining. Chapters 29, 30, and 31. So the tone doesn't fit the Job of chapters 26 and 27 and doesn't fit the tone of Job chapters 29, 30, and 31. What else? The content doesn't fit Job. Why in the world would he praise God's wisdom when he's been accusing God of injustice? And he does it again in chapters 29, 30, and 31. So the content doesn't fit. Unless Job's lost his mind or regained his senses just for a moment. But notice something else. Go back to chapter 25. This is easy and quick. I can do this, okay? Have you noticed, because I told you that this is a third-person account, we have a narrator that is telling us this story. This is not an autobiographical account of Job. He's not saying I, me, my. Job is referred to in the third person as he, him, his. Okay? So who's telling the story? Well, you're saying the author is. I know, but in the story, you have a narrator. And this narrator is so kind. This narrator has escorted us from earth to heaven, back to earth, back to heaven, back down to earth. Chapters 1 and 2 of the prologue. This narrator has informed us by introducing every speaker before the speaker speaks. Chapter 25. Narrator. Then Bildad the Shuhite answered. And then here comes Bildad. You're a maggot and a worm. Okay? Chapter 26. Then Job responded. And here comes Job. I'm not a worm. I'm not a maggot. Okay? We expect, because of round 1 and round 2, that there should be, after Bildad, a Zophar speech. But Zophar, he's not coming out. He didn't want to talk anymore. Okay? So what does the narrator say? Verse 1 of chapter 27. This has never been worded this way. Then Job continued his discourse and said, so that you know this is not Zophar talking. There's been a disruption in the pattern that you've expected. That's the only time thus far you've seen it worded that way. And Job continued his discourse and said. Now you got chapter 28. I'm telling you, this is an interlude. This is a disruption. This is an interruption. Okay? Now notice chapter 29, verse 1. The narrator stops talking. Now what does he say? He says it again. And Job again took up his discourse and said. In other words, I'm finished, and now Job's going to resume. We've had another break in the action. So chapter 27, verse 1 signals Zophar should have spoken, but instead it's Job. Chapter 29, 29 verse 1 tells us that the narrator has interrupted the action, but no more. Now Job's got the floor. He's got the mic again. Okay. So, what is chapter 28? It's a beautiful poem, by the way. It's a beautiful poem on wisdom. And it's a calm. It's the interlude. It's the intermission. And we all need sometimes an intermission. Because our brains have been throbbing. We've been reading these speeches, 16 speeches, where it has evolved. It has become more nasty. They are really, firing all rounds at each other, and it's like, oh my, we need a break. And all of a sudden, here's what happens. Oh, I can do this, right? Here's the narrator, and he presses pause on the DVD player, whatever that is, right? What's a DVD? And that's our kid. What is a DVD? I don't even know what a DVD is. Well, like a VCR. What's a VCR, right? So you press the pause. It's so crazy technology. I'm still in the 20th century. Okay, so presses the pause button, and now what happens? The narrator speaks to us because we need it. And what does the narrator say? Praises man from verse 1 through verse 19, talking about the accomplishments of human beings. How human beings can manipulate this planet. They can overturn mountains. They can stop rivers. They dig below ground and find the treasures that birds and beasts have never seen. Incredible, the ingenuity of human beings. And you know, it's coming. It's the but. I know. I get that sometimes. I love you, but. Oh. Okay. But, okay, verse 20. Where does wisdom come from? And where's the place of understanding? Human beings don't know. Not through their effort. They can't find it. Who's the source of it? God. You knew that. So he answers his own questions that he poses in verse 20. Where then does wisdom come from? Where is the place of understanding? Verse 23 answers the question. God understands its way and he knows its place, and then he tells us how to find it. Verse 28. And to man he has said, behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding. As an aside, this is the motto of wisdom literature. Proverbs 1 verse 7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Ecclesiastes chapter 12 verse 13 and 14. And the end of life, it is to fear God and to keep his commandments. This is wisdom. And now you have it here in Job chapter 28 verse 28. Proverbs 1 7, Ecclesiastes 12, 13 and 14. Job chapter 28 verse 28. Now what's he telling us? He's giving us perspective. You want wisdom? Go to God. Where isn't wisdom? In all of those noisy speeches that you just heard. There's no wisdom in anything those people said. None. Don't listen to it. You won't find it. Your brain's throbbing because you were searching for some sort of meaning and purpose in everything they said, and everything they said was wrong. He's just basically telling us, don't listen to Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar, and Job. They have no idea what they're talking about. And one of my... I like all these chapters, right, in this book I've written, but I know, that sounds so conceited. My God, that sounds horrible. But what really means a lot to me is this chapter on leaving it blank, chapter 8. I mentioned this in the podcast, the Morrison Heights podcast, leaving it blank. You're looking at somebody that doesn't like blanks. No, I don't. I'm just confessing to you. I don't like blanks. I want an answer. And if I can't get the right answer, I'm sticking an answer in the blank. Because I don't do well with nothing. I need to put something in the blank. And then here's what happens next. I react to that which I put in the blank, and it just then leads downward, and I'm just a mess after that. Someone should say, leave it blank. But what you did is you just put something that doesn't really have any basis in reality, but you put it in the blank, and now you're reacting to your own blank. How dare you? And I do it a lot. But I'm doing better now. I promise you, I'm doing better now. The medical community is grateful that I do not go to WebMD. I have banned myself from WebMD. You know why? Because when I'm experiencing some strange sensation, some swelling, some pain, what have I done in the past? I go to WebMD and I scroll down to the worst thing that it can be, and I go, that's it. I knew it. I knew it. It's over for me, you know. And I have no idea what I'm talking about. Do you see? I need to just leave it blank. So what have I done? I don't go to WebMD. I just leave it blank. It goes away. I pray and it goes away in about a week or so. Right. Leave it blank. And in this chapter, as I share, you all have had your own share of heartbreak and hardship. I with the permission of Anne Marie, our daughter, I speak about the fall of 2013 when Anne Marie first manifested bipolar disorder. And if any of you have ever had a loved one who has been through mental illness, it's a challenge. It really is. Thanks be to God, we're better today as a church in addressing. We're not completely there, but we're better. Used to be, man, you didn't say a word. Because the common response would be, you need to pray more and you need to read the Bible more. Right, Stephen? He knows. He's a professional. So I'm happy that we're better. We're better. We're coming around, okay? But man, that was horrible. That was rough to see your loved one suffer like she did, and we were just unable to do. For her to be okay, I guess, you know, can't respond to yes or no questions. Next moment, fetal position on the floor, weeping. What's just happened? Couldn't even bathe herself. Here's a 20-year-old, couldn't bathe herself. My wife had to take care of our daughter in that way. This broke our hearts. And the spring was also tough. I mean, it wasn't just over by I thought, it's like Advil, take the pill, and in 30 minutes, you're better, right? No, that's not the case. And then you got to adjust medications, and I'm thankful for the psychiatrist we went to, Andy Bishop. He did a good work on our behalf, and Anne-Marie's well. She really is medicated, but she's well, and she's living a good life, and she's happy, and that's a result of professionals. That's a result of great counseling. That's a result of answered prayer by my church. You all, there's a number of you that just helped us at that time. I remember Greg Belser calling and just said, Ivan, I just want to tell you we love you. I cannot presume I know what you're going through, but that's my pastor, right, calling me. And I said, thank you. Because the truth is, y'all, and I've said it to folks, I know I'm going off. I gotta make sense of this. I've told people I cannot walk this journey for you, but I am willing to walk it with you. Because God wanted Anne-Marie to walk that journey, and we went with her on that journey. But Dad wanted to say, please, let me trade places. Please, I've already lived my life. I don't need to live anymore, okay? I'll take it. But the Lord said, no, that's not my plan. My plan is for her to go through this. So we walked with her through it. And a number of you, thank you. You were our blessing, and you sustained us, and you walked with us too. So, y'all, we processed this as a family differently, and it's not just the individual. I mean, it's a family situation. You know, it's a family dynamic. How did Marianne handle it? She just cried. Just cried. That's how she deals with it. She cries and she feels better, and that's a good way to handle it. I just don't do that. What happened with me is I would wake up at 3 a.m. and wide awake, and then these gnawing questions would just in my head. God, will Anne-Marie ever be better? Will the old Anne-Marie ever come back? Will she graduate from college? Will she get a job? Will she get married? God, will these medications work? All these gnawing questions, and I couldn't answer a one of them. And it was finally then that the Lord showed to me, you know what? You are no more qualified to handle a what if than you are qualified to handle a what. I can't handle a what. Can you? No, you can't. Apart from Christ, what? You can do nothing. We can't handle the whats of life. So why in the world are we attempting to tackle the what ifs? And so I resolved, with the wheels turning, and I was wide awake, I said, God, here was the most eloquent prayer that I could utter. And it wasn't the King James language. I have prayed King James language. I have. But in that moment, all I could say was, God help us. God help us. I just kept saying that over and over. I don't know if you've been there where that's all you can utter from your soul, but it means so much to the Lord God. It's sincere, and I'm telling you, it works. I just kept saying, God help us, God help us. And you know what? The peace of God that passes all understanding came, and I went back to sleep. Leave it blank. Leave it blank. I've also decided, because I want an answer, and I'm struggling here with worry, right? That's not faith. I finally said, this has been great, because this has happened through even just writing this book. I needed to write this book for myself, okay? I've said, God, you're going to handle this. You're going to take care of this detail. I refuse now. I'm telling you. He knows. I've said it to him. I refuse to worry anymore. You know why? Because by worrying, I'm basically saying, without saying any words, that you can't do it, that you're not going to take care of this, and you don't care for me. And how dare I never would say those things to God. But by worrying, I'm basically saying the same thing. You don't care. You're not going to do anything. It's going to be the same old, same old. So I just basically say, God, I need this. This has got to happen. And he does. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable he does. So I'm just telling you. So what happens? Okay, so he tells us about wisdom, and then he gets back, right, and then he hits the play button again. And Job, he'd been frozen, right, by the remote control. And then he gets to speak again, and he talks again, and he's talking, and the friends aren't talking anymore, but God's not talking either. Okay? So this is chapters 29, 30, and 31. You've got a handout page, I believe it's page 23, that summarizes well this section. This is Job's second monologue. Why is it the second monologue? You know why? Because the first monologue was chapter 3. This is the second monologue, chapters 29, 30, and 31. In chapter 29, you have the before picture as Job reminisces about the good old days. And this is kind of comical, right? Because the older we get, we talk more about the good old days, really frustrate our kids, right? They love hearing about how good the good old days were. But we never make any sense because we tell them, oh, they were so hard. You have it so easy, but they were so good. You can't say both. They're not both true. Because my dad said that. How hard it was, how easy I had it. And then it was also the good old days. I'm like, no. But I dare not speak back to him because I'd get in trouble for a bad attitude, right? So here it is, the good old days, right? Verse 2, chapter 29. Oh, that I were as in months gone by, as in the days when God watched over me, when his lamp shone over my head, and by his light I walked through darkness, as I was in the prime of my days, when the friendship of God was over my tent, when the Almighty was yet with me. How sad. He mentions his kids in verse 5, and my children were around me. You got to sympathize with them. Verse 6, when my steps were bathed in butter. Maybe that's not really something ideal. That's kind of slippery, treacherous, for butter to cover your steps, right? Okay. Then what? Chapter 30. Oh, how horrible it is now. Oh, it's horrible. The pain. And yeah, he is going through pain. And he's upset at God. God's responsible for what he's going through. He expected good, verse 26 of chapter 30, but evil came. He waited for light, then darkness came. God's the one who's done this. And the accusation, man, he portrays God as this warrior that's just attacking him. Verses 9 through 15. I won't read those. You almost don't recognize that the same person is the before picture and the after picture. I've mentioned this before. I'm one of those skeptics that look at those campaigns which have the before and after advertising. You know, eat broccoli for a year and you'll look like this. Or wear this product. Or take this pill. Or do this exercise regimen. You know, and they have this before and after, and the before is a miserable looking person. I mean, they must tell them, look like this, you know. And then they have a whole new wardrobe after eating broccoli for a year, and they look so impressive after, you know. And I'm like, that's, you know, but here's what I'm saying, that's not the same person. I don't know, I'm a skeptic. I go, there's a touch up here. That's not the same person, right? And the same response is like you look at chapter 29, chapter 30, this is not the same person. But it is. Finally, chapter 31, and here's where we land the plane, okay? Oath of innocence. Y'all, God is still not talking, so what do you do if you're Job? You've sued him. God's still not talking. So here's what you do. He's a guy. What do guys do? I dare you. Girls don't talk like that. Girls were much smarter growing up, right? They just thought us guys were silly. Can't believe you talk like that. You dare. No, I double dare you. Oh, I triple dog dare you. Girls typically don't talk like that. Typically. Now, I had Becky DeWitt say I talk like that because she had 3 brothers. So she had no choice but to talk like that. But, you know, that's why, you know, we're always daring each other, upping each other, and that's why boys don't live very long. And girls are like just shaking their heads. I just can't believe these guys, you know. So what does he do? I'm asking you a question. You already know the answer. Has he been through it enough? He's covered with sores. He's buried 10 children, and he has nothing. Has he been through enough suffering, in your opinion? I think so. But he wishes even more harm upon him in chapter 31. The oath of innocence. This is unprecedented. Okay? Here's where I'm going to read just several verses, and then I'll make one statement, and then you have to go. Understand that. Okay? So he's wishing more harm because he's daring God to get him. I'm innocent, and I'm telling you I'm innocent. And if you think I'm not, prove it to me and do more harm to me. Okay? So look at this, verse 9. If my heart has been enticed by a woman, you know, if I'm guilty of, if it was lust or adultery on my part, may my wife grind for, let's go ahead, let my wife sleep with another person. May my wife grind for another and let others kneel down over her. Can you believe that? Look at this, another one. Verse 21. If I use my position of authority to harm the orphan, verse 21. Verse 22. Let my shoulder fall from the socket and my arm be broken off at the elbow. Dude, you've got sores all over. Now you want your arm to fall off? But, I mean, he's got to up it, right? I dare you, God. I dare you to do more to me because I'm innocent. Okay? Here's the strategy, and he's absolutely confident about this. I'm going to read 3 verses to show his confidence, one statement, and then we're done. What's his strategy? If God doesn't show up, he wins by forfeit. God's a coward. If God does show up, I win because I made him talk. Okay? Look at his confidence. This would have made us uncomfortable if we'd been the audience. Verse 35, 36, and 37. Oh, that I had one to hear me. God, right? Isn't there something wrong with God's hearing? Behold, here's my autograph, my signature. Let the Almighty answer me. And the indictment which God, my adversary, has written. Surely I would carry it on my shoulder. I would bind it to myself like a crown. I would declare to him the number of my steps, and I'll approach his presence like a prince. Really? Is that what you're going to do? And we're thinking, is God going to now burn him up with a lightning bolt? Is God going to show up? And you know what happens? You know what happens instead? Elihu shows up. Chapter 32. And my students say, Elihu? And what's the point? You can't make God do. He's God. Let him be God. And thankfully, he is. We'll finish this tomorrow. So glad to have you with us. You have a good night. Go get the kids. I know.